Hi, I'm Sarah Richardson, former CIO and president of the 229 Executive Development Community, with a passion for empowering others to reach their full potential. Welcome to Flourish, where we delve into captivating career origin stories, sparking conversations that inspire, inform, and foster a sense of community. Join us as we explore the journeys that have shaped successful professionals and uncover the insights that can help you thrive in your own career path. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to today's episode of Flourish, where we explore the forefront of healthcare innovation. Our guest is Lisa Esch, a seasoned healthcare executive with extensive experience in digital transformation and strategy. Lisa most recently served as the Chief of Innovation, Strategy, and Offerings at NTT Data Services and is now founder and CEO of Advisory.Studio, focusing on executive coaching and fractional executive services. With a strong background in developing and implementing cutting-edge digital health initiatives, Lisa has been instrumental in driving change across the healthcare industry. Tune in today as we delve into her insights on the future of digital health and the impact of emerging technologies. This is our first episode of Flourish. Lisa, thank you for being the very first guest.
Sarah, it is wonderful to be here. I'm excited to be your first guest today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. And Flourish is all about our career paths and journeys, and to me, especially about the connections we make along the way. And I feel like I've known you a long time, but I realized we actually met at a dinner at Fall Forum in San Diego about 3 years ago. It's probably about the timeline. And yet so many things have happened in 3 years, and our friendship just continues to grow. And that's really what I want people to be able to take away from the conversations inside of Flourish, is that the friendships are real. We do what we do every day for a living because that's our passion and where we find the momentum to do what we do. But more than anything, you create the relationships with people and how often they turn into friendships where you're like, I'm calling Lisa first as an example. So I love that we get to tell that story too. But I really want to hear about your new endeavor. When you look up something and you say CEO of Advisory.Studio, you're like, I could do that someday. I could be a CEO of a company. So many of us are always thinking about how you climb each rung of the ladder to get where you want to be. And so for you starting Advisory.Studio, whole new endeavor, whole new effort. Tell us about that.
Sarah, you were one of the first people I called when I was ready to transition. So I remember that phone call several months ago. And when I really was thinking about transitioning into something new and what the opportunities were out there, I had the best role at my previous company. I worked with amazing people, and it was really a fun place to be in technology and transformation and all of that. But it was time to do something else. And when I looked at what could be out there, I could do another company thing, or I could really take my experience and touch a lot more companies and a lot more people and help accelerate this transition that's happening in the marketplace. And there's so many people like me in this part of their career, in this place in their career, that part of what the Advisory.Studio is a team of people. There's a network of us out there that have all different kinds of experience. So as you're trying to tackle challenge, transformation, problems, you need projects done, those types of things. There's this depth of talent out there that's very experienced, and that we can come together and support each other and get work done really quickly because of that experience.
What I love about your profile as I was continuing to review, because you always go look and say, should I be amping up my profile? I love that you have 40 years of experience listed, and that's a big deal. And so I'm curious very specifically, as you think about navigating and overcoming challenges related to ageism in your career, and what advice you give to other women or men facing the same challenges. And I say that because I tell people I have 30 years of experience and I'm gonna be 50 years old next month, because I feel like that matters. And we were so long told to hide that aspect about it. Don't tell people when you graduated from college because then they'll know how old you are. And now rethinking that, what are your perspectives on that very question of ageism?
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I typically, when I hit 25 years of experience, I just changed it for the last 15 years. It says over 25. And it wasn't till now that I was brave enough to put 40 down. My first job in a hospital was when I was 18 years old. I've got over 40 years of experience. And I took my dates that I graduated from college off, and I didn't put those things there because ageism in the last 10 or 15 years, it's very real. People look at you as being at the end of your career. What are you going to give me? Are you going to be as hungry? And when you're looking to work in the corporate environment, it's not something people have those thoughts. They have those private conversations. And in others, it's just this unconscious bias. It might not be intentional. And so for me to put that on my profile now, I was encouraged by my daughter to do that. Actually, she's like, Mom, that really matters. And so I put it out there. And as we look at how we're putting together the team for Advisory.Studio, they all have 20, 30, 40 years of experience. And there's deep experience with the team that we're putting together. And I'm excited to be part of that and to have this group of colleagues who could easily go out and get jobs, or they can do the consulting and the advisory and really help pick the things that they want to work on and help drive the transformation that we're seeing in the marketplace. And that's probably what excites me the most, is being able to really bring that expertise and help a startup, help an organization that needs to transform, help someone move to the next space. And that's what we can do.
I love that. So tell me more about the motivation to pursue the fractional work instead of traditional full-time, and really curating all of these connections with very specific or even very extensive skill sets, years of experience, industry experience. Fractional is becoming more and more common. I think it hit my radar a little over a year ago, and now I hear about being, for many, a preferred element of work. It's almost like a new gig economy, is this fractional work that we're seeing. So when you made the decision to do that, what was that fork in the road for you?
So part of it came out of my experience probably in the last 3 or 4 years, where I was watching smaller companies, startups in particular, invest in full-time employees and then have this heavy burden of having a full-time executive or having a full-time role, figure out what to do, how do you get the most out of that? And sometimes it wasn't a good fit, or a part of what they got part of what they needed, but then they were paying, it didn't always work. And so to me, I've been advising for a while now, for particularly in the startup space, hire fractional, get that senior expertise that can just really hone in on messaging, on value, on relationships, on strategy in a way that just somebody with less experience that might be full time with you can't do. And so part of it was just really seeing the marketplace and what somebody needs. But also, fractional can be something with a medium or large organization as well. You might be in transition and need a specific skill to help you through transition for a specific amount of time. And it could be a full time, or it could be fractional, but it's a defined period of time with a defined outcomes that really help you get through that. So I think that there's this economy out there that really is supporting fractional work. And I think it's a smart way to really drive transformation in a business and growth in a business, and be very specific on what you do. So the conversations I'm having right now, often I'm still being pinged for full-time roles for X, Y, or Z. And I talk to them, I'm like, you don't need me full-time. We can probably get this done in this amount of time. And those are the kinds of things that we're talking about then with the fractional work. And it really is, it's fun for me to be able to touch several different things at one time and still balance my work-life balance as well.
When you introduce that idea to an organization, they're like, we want Lisa. And they realize that you're like, you actually need me maybe 15 hours a week.
Yeah.
How open are organizations to hearing candidates say that? Because typically it's the pursuit of the full-time role. And maybe there's people out there want that career change. So I guess my question is probably twofold for you, is how are organizations receiving that response from you? And then if a person really wants to do 2 fractional gigs versus that full-time corporate role, how do they even think about getting there?
So I'll tackle your first question
Yeah.
about how does an organization respond to that? Some of them are open to it and some of them aren't. Culturally, in their mind, they just see this, it needs to be a X kind of a role. It just depends on what it is. but it's also the market is changing and the talent pool looks different than it did previously. And so organizations are open to having that conversation. And maybe they only need 10, 15 hours a week, and you can do the job in that, which it might take somebody else full time. I have a really good friend who's a sales leader, and I worked with her in a previous organization. And I tell you what, she is like, she gets the work done. She's the most efficient sales leader I'd ever met. And man, she could just get her activity down. She got the work done, and she worked smart, not a lot of time. And it really taught me something. This is 10 or 15 years ago. And she's still out there in the market today. So whenever she gets to land her new gig in the next transition, that's the kind of talent she brings to them. And so I think that culturally, organizations need to think differently about that kind of talent. Or maybe it's too early for someone with my type of experience or a senior person's experience to be engaged. So you can start with a small amount of work and navigate through. You have to get away from thinking about time. And if you're not putting 40 hours a week in, or as a leader, 50 or 60 hours a week in, are you getting what you need? And you can't measure leadership like that anymore. You have to really define the outcomes and the activities, focus on those things, and then pay for that in a fractional way. And you can oftentimes be a lot farther ahead than just bringing on somebody full time. It's doing things that maybe aren't necessarily as important as you think they are. Because when you're fractional, man, you are doing exactly what you need to do to drive the highest, best outcomes in the shortest amount of time, and everybody's lined up for that. And so you take out a lot of the work that maybe isn't necessary as an executive.
That provides a tremendous advantage to the organization who understands that perspective, because burnout's real everywhere. And I remember seeing a presenter not too long ago who talked about the Zoom revolution has actually added 2.5 to 3 hours a day to our plates. And we're actually, especially women, getting paid less for the time they're putting in and getting burnt out faster and staring at yourself all day. And that psychological perspective of, you and I would never sit this close to each other if we were in person. It's the equivalent of our knees touching in a conversation, which is just, even if you're great friends, it would be super awkward for like a whole hour in a conversation. And wow, if someone can come in, get it done, move on, etc., just that burnout perspective is it's a huge win across the board.
It is. Yeah, and I think it really helps. In the fractional piece, it's definitely something to consider. And even if your organization, you don't think it's ready for it, you'd be surprised at what you can get done with defined expectations and outcomes.
Is it easier for a practitioner to go out, and I say practitioner in terms of people like you and I, is it easier for us to go out on our own and try it? Or do you find a collective like what you've created with your organization? Does someone say, you know what, I want to go work for Advisory.Studio and this is my way into the fractional space? Or do you just hang out your independent shingle? Like, how do people think about the best way to do it?
Yeah, I think for me, it really was my network. And when I was ready for transition this time in my career, the people that I'm talking to and reaching out to, like, oh, I'm going to make this transition too. How are you thinking about this? So there's this, oh, I know someone that did that. Talk to them. And so it really is the network of people. And I've had just the privilege of working and connecting with amazing people throughout my career. And going back and reconnecting with those that you haven't talked to in a while, and then still connecting with those that are probably in the most 3 to 5 years, people are willing to help you. You let people know what you can do, how you do it, what you're thinking about, and they're like, I know someone that could use that. So it really is just a trusted network. And my team, very curated. It isn't for everyone. And the standard's pretty high. And when I put my word out there, when we're going to do something together, it is very trusted. And so it is my brand now. And so we've got to be really careful about how we deliver on that and what we do. But I've been in the industry a long time, and I've worked with amazing people, and people are willing to help other people all the time.
One of the things you're doing that I love is the evaluation and selection of startups, where to invest, about the founder experience, market potential. They can't afford a chief growth officer, chief strategy officer, 40 hours plus a month, but they could 40 hours a month. Wouldn't that be an awesome job? That is 10 hours a week.
They,
If you had that opportunity, that's what they really need. Is when you think about that, and there's so much conversation about startups right now, whether is financing drying up, is 2025 the year that there's more of an opportunity for the market to expand in some of these spaces. When you think about key factors and considering startups that need investment or looking for certain areas of help, what are the things that you focus on?
a couple things to unpack here. First of all, last year the money dried up. This year is the year that probably half the startups are going to go under because the funding isn't there. They didn't hit their numbers. They got money in the bank in the big boom, and they were overvaluated, and there's just no way they can deliver on what they promised. So there's going to be a lot by the end of the year. I've heard talk of half of it, 50% of them are going to go away. So there's going to be a lot of IP out there for cheap that other organizations can scoop up that are just waiting. So one of it is the money just isn't there, and the institutional investors dried up. People got really burned. So 25 will be a better year. We'll start seeing some of that turnaround. But in the meantime, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've looked at several hundred startups. Part of it was to curate our startup marketplace that I put together with my last employer. We were able to bring innovation to our customers in a way that I work for a large IT company. We were never going to be creating that kind of thing, but they trusted us to bring good ideas. So the job was to bring good ideas. I've sat on the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, their project healthcare cohort for the last 4 years now. And here we pick 15, 16, 17 startups and we mentor them and we guide them with funding and ideas and how do you move forward and all those kinds of things. When I'm looking at startups, particularly in healthcare is a little different. There's some key things I think that are really important. And first of all, you really want to think about what is the problem you're trying to solve. So many times, back in January, we kicked off this 2024 cohort for the Project Healthcare. And I did a roundtable with all 17 of the startups, and they had 5-7 minutes and give me your pitch and what's your value proposition and all those kinds of things. And a lot of them were fairly early yet, and we're having a difficult time even talking about what problem they're trying to solve. And so being able to really define the problem they're trying to solve, who's their buyer, what's the value proposition to the buyer. If you can't talk about those three things, you're going to really struggle in this space. And oftentimes founders are the ones pitching the idea, and they're talking about how they built it, they're talking about what it does, but they're not talking about the value of it and what it can really do. They're talking about how it's built or how it's unique. So there's a lot when it comes to the value proposition, promise trying to solve, and the market. And I'd say anybody that's trying to build a solution and sell into provider right now is really going to struggle because culturally, organizations in healthcare are slow to change. So you might have a really good idea that's going to solve something, but you're competing with all these other things and no money and no budgets and just broken healthcare. It's really hard to break into that part of healthcare. If you're driving something along patient engagement in the payer and life science, those spaces, sometimes med device, those are a little easier from a standpoint of the market because there's money out there to be spent on buying what you're creating. So that's a big piece of it. Looking at whether a founder, is this the first time they've done it? If not, how close are they with other like founders that can help get them launched? If somebody has had a successful exit, that's usually a really good indication they can do it again. And even if the idea isn't great, you can tweak the idea if you've had somebody that knows how to do it. So that is key. Now, there are many organizations that are new founders that have never done it before that are successful. But that's oftentimes a big hurdle for organizations in getting funding. And so those are just some of the things that you think about. And there's so much hubbub right now with AI. There's a lot of noise. If you're just going to build another point solution there, man, you better be unique and not just another widget, because that's not a long-term strategy. So there's a lot to it, but it boils down to the value proposition, the problem you're trying to solve, who's your buyer, and what's the value and ROI back to that person. If you can't articulate those things, then you're going to really struggle.
I think we could turn this podcast today into a masterclass on how to get your pitch out there for entering healthcare services. To your point, like maybe it's not the hospital, maybe it's med devices, life sciences, pharma, etc. And yet, here's what I always find fascinating, why I ask the questions about startups, what I do. I'm fascinated by how many amazing ideas are out
There
there.
are.
I'm fascinated by the founders that I meet, and I'm on a couple of boards for them because I believe in what they're endeavoring to achieve. Whether or not they're successful, I'm hopeful that I get to be a component of that because I love why they're doing what they're doing. But again, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and the actual value that gets turned into the monetization of it to be cash flow positive by a certain point is a real conversation. It's a real thing. And even yesterday, I was speaking with one of my friends who's become CIO of a company. It's about 3 years old now. It's an amazing idea. And whether or not it ever gets enough teeth to stick around in the marketplace, they're not the only ones doing what they're doing.
That
And I
might,
asked the
yep.
question, I'm like, what's the workflow like? What's the patient experience like? Where do your clinicians come from? How are they not getting burnt out? How are you integrating it back into the EMR? What does the primary care physician see versus the practitioner who's feeding in this information separately? All of those pieces come in and they're like, these are all excellent questions. Now, this person was able to answer them, and I knew that they would be able to. And they're like, it's taken a long time for us to get there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ideas out there that'll never make it. That's why you have to take a step back and look at what is really going to drive the who's going to buy it. Unless you really come into a place where you can identify who your buyer is, that they will have budget for it. And then if they buy it, that culturally the organization will use it. You've got to understand that piece of it and have a way in to get it in there and tested. So that's a big piece of it. But the other part of it is then what if it is a really good idea? How do you scale it? What if you're a software company? How do you manage the account? Like you can't, like scaling from 8 people in a garage is really challenging. So you have to find partners. Do you white label it? There's so many other things to take into account. But there's a lot of good ideas that will never, ever come to fruition because they're not transformational enough. And then you have to look at what's a deal size. Is it a bunch of little deals? You'd have to have an army of Salesforce to sell that much to get to a $50 million. There's no way you can do that. There's just other things once you get those first 3 questions asked that take you to your next level as to whether or not you invest in. I coach a lot of executives on those things. And so it can be brutal the first time you pitch to me.
So as you think about just that startup landscape, when you think about emerging technologies in general that you believe are going to shape the future of healthcare, not just in startups and in general, what has you most excited? And what are you like, that's the phone call I want for my company?
Yeah, if you're in data and analytics and AI and generative AI, I do a lot of advisory and consulting on setting up governance for Gen AI. How do you pick partners, foundation models? Do you go with Microsoft, Google, AWS? Like, whose tools do you use? Do I just wait for Epic to just get it built in? I do a lot of advisory around generative AI and AI strategy and then governance over it. So as a startup, that's good and that's bad, because if you've got tools and capabilities that you can help there, you're in a space that people at least will have budget for. So everyone will be spending money on AI, generative AI in the next 3 to 5 years on some type of project. But when you come to do that, there are 2 paths that you can take. You can take point solution, go after a very specific process and problem that you can fix with a generative AI tool and go fix that. But then you end up as an organization with all these little point solutions all over your system, and it may not connect unless you have a strategy and a way to make all that connect. If you're doing something that's business transformational, so look at all the inefficiency in healthcare. And if you can take out that inefficiency with generative AI preemptively and help with workflow, burnout, have technology do the work of people and let people do the things that only people can do, you'll be gold. And so those are the things to really invest in. And there's some cool companies out there in healthcare doing that. And I think that's great. But again, as a large organization, you need a strategy before you go spend money on it. And you have vendors coming to you. You need to just take a step back. How are you going to measure it? What are you going to do? But generative AI is going to transform the workplace in every single industry. And you can sit back and wait and watch your competitors take advantage of it and catch up later, or you can leap forward and do that. But putting that strategy together and doing it now is really important.
That's important for the CIO though, as well. Yes, there's the company that needs your help to figure these pieces out. If you're sitting in the CIO chair and you're thinking about how to deliver this perspective to your board, to your peers, and whatnot. Even yesterday, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about AI revolution is losing steam because it's trained itself on everything that's out there, and it's more expensive to keep mining it than it is to produce the results. And there's someone that's going to latch on to that article. There's someone who's going to latch on to the, oh my gosh, we are so far behind. How come we're not doing this? And there's all that in between that really is the CIO, CDO, CMIO. You pick a C-suite technologist, they're responsible for conveying that message. If you're in that chair, you're speaking to your board as the CIO, what are you going to say to them?
There really is a balance because they have probably 100, 150 ideas for Gen AI projects. Every single department in that organization is coming to them. They're just being bombarded. And so they have a hard job because they have to balance the politics of people groups needing to do stuff for today and having budget for that, along with the heavy burden that technology costs an organization. And how do you start the strategy to be removing the work and the processes and digitizing those things and using AI to do that work to become more efficient so you can take that spend and do it for the innovation and the other transformation things. It is a two-pronged approach. There's a balance of point solutions that you can go get easy wins, create value, create money, create savings. There are solutions out there that'll do that today that you will not risk your job on. And then along that parallel path, though, you've got to put that long-term strategy of business transformation in place because there is so much inefficiency in healthcare that generative AI can really solve quickly. This is not a 5-year transition. This is in 6 months, you'll see a difference. In 12 months, you'll see a difference. In 90 days, you should be able to get things stood up. It's not that complicated, only if you make it complicated. So there's that whole piece of it. And then that's where it's important to have the CIO in the business understanding what that is. But the CIO can drive that business transformational change fairly quickly. Low risk.
Yeah, low risk. So it's been fascinating. This is like when EMRs became more and more prevalent, and they've been around for a long time. But you thought the late 90s, you had the older systems, but in the 2000s, we really started to get specific about computerized physician order entry, around creating a space where all the documentation went into the EMR directly, and we started to pull insights out of that. And I remember all the people who were waiting for it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it's not going away. And there was a lot of conversations. I worked in an environment where union negotiation came with the onset because there wasn't meaningful use yet, as an example. When you think about that incrementalism and partnering with the organization so that it's not happening to them, what would you say? How would you make it sound like we're doing these things together for these reasons? This is how it's going to impact the organization in a much more thoughtful approach versus a mandated approach. And that's really too often we feel like things happen to us. When you think about that organizational change management element, what has worked for you in the past?
Part of the noise and the chaos around AI is, first of all, it wasn't born last January. It's been around a long time. These companies, the three bigs, have been at this for several years. And so their models, their foundation models, just pick a partner. You have to have a strategy. You have to take a step back. What are you going to try to accomplish? Pick your partners, and then bring your organization in and figure out where the highest return is. And that's why you need partners to do this. You can't figure this out yourself. The experts sit outside your organization. Bring them in, they'll help you. And you can go faster with this, because the faster you go, the more savings you create, the more value you create, the more employees you retain, the more physicians you retain, the higher you can reduce your claims denials. There's so many things that you can do that are just part of the business of healthcare, let alone what the experience of healthcare is, because that's a whole nother strategy that AI can really augment and support. So I'm just talking about the business of healthcare versus the clinical, the patient, and that piece of it as well is needing a strategy. You have to have a strategy.
Is it too unique to think that you would hire a fractional CAIO to dip your toe into that water?
No, I think that would be a good place to start, because again, you can do that assessment up front and guide the people in your organization, but having that outside guidance is really important.
I love what we said. Start simple, start with something that makes sense. Have a problem to solve versus just introducing one more aspect into the mix, because we've all been in IT. You and I've been in IT for 70 years. Guess what? When something gets introduced, when's the last time you retired a piece of technology or equipment? I will honestly say the last time I remember a big decommissioning of something was back in 2003 when we replaced Novell with Windows. I don't know about a bigger decom party since the early 2000s. I don't even know if people have them anymore, but let's resurrect that part of the celebration process of project implementation. What did it replace?
Yeah, it's tough, but you have to come back with a really defined strategy, outcomes you can measure, and then work through how to get there and putting the right team together to do it. And it'll be a combination of inside, outside.
I love that perspective. You make it approachable in a way that's, I can do this. I can have these conversations. I can think about these aspects versus the overwhelming nature of so many of the things that come at us every single day. I want to ask you what I would call a couple of speed round questions. We'll see where we land with these. And so you did touch on the AI aspect and a couple other elements. If you could automate one task in healthcare, what would it be?
Oh, check in. We just still overcomplicate it. You do something online and you still have to sign paperwork or do things. Having my records follow me everywhere I go. And so I had a complete record with me at all the time, and I didn't have to repeat putting information in every time I saw a different physician, a different health system. I think that our disconnected medical records is so beyond where we need to be today in technology. It should be fixable, and we haven't fixed it yet.
And yet our listeners are going to go, oh, but here's 8 solutions that do that today. Try it.
Yeah.
And there's so much progress being made. But here's the deal. Not everybody's going to give you the information. Not everybody is going to give you the information, even though by law they need to, but interoperability is still a challenge in getting everything in one place. So I love that solutions are coming out that are doing it. And my goodness, whether you've got myriad portals that come with your EMRs, to your point, it's hard to get all your information in one place. I have moved 7 times in 20 years for myriad reasons. My records are everywhere, everywhere.
I just remember how sad I was when Microsoft Health Vault shut down. They were so early on. What was that, 15 years ago? It was a long time ago. They were onto something, and we're just not ready to fix that problem, or it would be fixed.
Even now, I moved a couple of years ago, reestablishing all my care. And I have a physician who's on electronic records, but you still have to validate your information on paper once a year.
I know.
I was like, really? And I told them how they could do it in an automated fashion. And they were like, you're the patient. We're good. I was like, okay, next. It was interesting. What's your favorite app or tool that helps you stay organized at work?
OneNote. I use OneNote to take notes in. I organize things. If I've had meetings and notes, I stick it all in there. OneNote is the single tool that I just collaborate and put everything to. So I like OneNote.
It's a tried and true staple. I think we've all used it for a decade plus or more. And it's the one that just keeps on going. Don't mess with it. Don't break it. Please don't fix something that's working. And if you could debunk a myth about healthcare, what would it be?
That we're fully interoperable.
Back to the beginning of our conversation.
Or that everyone's on Epic. the system's on Epic, it all comes together now, or the system's on whatever. Just the inability to share and have access to patient information is a huge obstacle that is ridiculous.
And in the next 3 to 5 years, what are you most hopeful about in healthcare? When you say, okay, you know what, 5 years from today, this should be true for me, for others, etc.
I think the patient experience should be different. I think that when we access healthcare and get it, I think that having our claims denied, not paid right, delayed, physicians get paid on time, hospitals get paid, insurance companies get paid, everybody. I think that administrative burden that happens and it sucks up 20-30% of the cost of healthcare, which is a complete waste, and it riles me up. If AI and Gen AI can't fix that, again, we don't want it fixed then, because that is where administrative waste, administrative burden is where technology can really help take out the high cost of delivering healthcare. And imagine if a physician's office that has 3 or 4 people managing paperwork and approvals, if they only needed one, you could imagine that, and then you could have more clinicians, and you could just change all of that. So we've got to clean up the administrative burden.
Yeah, because then you can get access to care and health equity and tackle all the other perspectives. Let's be honest, an aging population that's going to need additional support, and that same population has the hardest time navigating care to a degree, and also the advocacy that goes with the ability to age longer, healthier, happier in place. But when you do get sick, you need help, and that becomes that population that, to your point, if it can be automated and easier to get what you need, imagine how much healthier and longer we can live in that exact environment. Yeah. Lisa, thank you so much for being a part of Flourish. Thank you for being the first guest. Thank you for sharing your perspectives, your years of experience, for your friendship, and the ability for us to come back. And every time we do chat in person, or when we just pick up the phone and do that, because I've had very significant conversations with you in a parking lot. Hey, these are the reasons we do what we do, because outside of the things we hear and see, you can pick up the phone and literally call somebody who has a perspective, has an answer, and quite honestly will steer you in the right direction. And that's what Flourishing Together is all about. Thank you for today.
You're welcome. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for tuning into Flourish, where we unearth the hidden gems of career journeys, illuminating paths to success and fulfillment. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with your peers and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We hope these stories are a catalyst of inspiration within you, propelling you forward in your own career odyssey. Stay connected, stay curious, and keep flourishing.